I think number one, in terms of helping people with it, is having no agenda about it. Really not concerning yourself with whether or not somebody's feeling it, or they're just thinking they're feeling it in their head. So whenever I get kind of intense and want someone to be more understanding than they are, it obscures my own ability to think freely in the moment. So that's something I've just learned about doing this for a living, is the second it becomes about me and me wanting them to see something, I've gotten lost in my personal thinking, which means I can't really dive into it in an impersonal, hopefully profoundly helpful way. I always see that the less personal I am, the more helpful it is. The second I get into my personal thought about it, I'm not as effective. Erin once said, when we were working with this business in England, actually here in England, they were an extremely intellectual bunch, extremely, very bright, and very much, yeah, I know, I've heard this before. And Erin said something along the lines of, look, it never has anything to do with the content of what we're talking about. It's what goes beyond the content into the feeling. And the only way you go beyond the content and get to the feeling is you go beyond your intellect. And the only way to do that with people is to literally slow down the intellectual treadmill they're normally on. So the most effective, but let's be honest, totally arbitrary way we've discovered to do that is to kind of see people in an intensive fashion. So we kind of immerse people, and we immerse them over several days. And the reason we immerse them over several days is because what we've seen happen to people, and it's very rare that it doesn't happen to somebody, because people naturally resonate with what you're trying to say. And I think people naturally want more of the feeling and less of the intellect, whether they'd say that or not. So what we try to do with people over the days is literally slow their thinking down like you would slow down a fan. So, what we said to this one group that was like, yeah, we know it. And basically said, look, what we're going to do with you over 5 days is we're going to keep throwing cards, the same cards. There's really only one point here, which is that it's all thought. Thought is illusory. Your experience is illusory. We're going to keep throwing these same cards over and over and over again, but nothing's going to get through until the fan blade gets slow enough. And so I think when I talk with people who, I get it, it's all fascinating, it's always bounced off the same level. It's the blade of, yeah, I know, I get this, and it's their intellect. You're constantly bouncing off their intellect. No one can really, truly experience profound change and insight and peace of mind until it gets beyond the blade of the intellect. And that's, again, as I said before, the principles are a metaphor for something much bigger. All the different ideas we have for how to slow people down are just a metaphor for something much bigger. It's truly kind of mysterious to me. I don't entirely understand how it happens. I just know that ultimately every human being wants to. I've never met a person that after enough time didn't want to settle out of their intellect. Because there's a certain workload that comes with maintaining your ideas all the time. And so I think if you just have faith that it's a human desire, that people genuinely have this innate wisdom and well-being, and they want it to come to the surface. If you kind of hang in there, you don't have an agenda, you don't get personally invested in how quickly they're getting that it will happen eventually. And I'm always shocked. I'm completely shocked, because the people that I think in my head are going to do great, kind of slowing down and dropping their intellect, sometimes don't. And then other people that I think, oh geez, this one's going to be a toughie. sometimes just fall right out of it. It's so unpredictable because it's not about the individual person. Well, the intellect is an incredible gift. And Sid used to say all the time, I'm not telling you to abandon your intellect, or I'm not telling you to abandon your ego, and even if I was, you couldn't. So, good luck with that one. You're not whole if you're just the intellect, in the sense that you literally are making everything harder for yourself. So, what people don't have an appreciation for is there's an intelligence that's so much bigger than your personal intellect. Personal intellect is basically an accrual of your ideas over time. So if you've done a lot of reading, or you happen to just be very bright, so you're good at retaining facts and information, and you can go on Jeopardy and kill everybody, great, But that's a very personal machine. It's like a computer. Beyond that, there's something that's more like the life force that even makes that machine possible. And I think what happens, is, particularly in our culture, there's a huge emphasis on the intellect, and people are quite proud of it, and we're always shining it and buffing it and putting it out there. And the thing is, and everybody knows this, again, I think people ultimately, in their core, know it anyway, there's something bigger than my intellect, because there's been times in my life where my intellect has had nothing to draw upon. Like, I've been in situations where I don't know anything about it. I'm just thrust into the unknown, and somehow I find my way. And for that to be possible, people have to be more than their intellect. And so we just want people to gain an appreciation for, a faith in, and an understanding of the fact that you are so much more than your intellect. And I think just the more people can rely on that and understand it and look to it, they don't feel as restricted by the limitations of what they know intellectually. It's like, we worked with this one guy who was extremely, extremely bright. And he said at the end of a 5-day course, so the first 4 days, all he did was want to tell you what he knew. Oh, well, this reminds me of, in quantum physics, there's blah, 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 blah. And he knew so much. I mean, it was captivating to listen to him. It's like, wow, this guy knows so much information. But he was so about just getting out what he knew, what he knew, what he knew, what he knew. And it was all intellect, all intellect. And on the last day, he was like super quiet and kind of spaced out. And really, he was in a very different feeling state. And the guy next to him raises his hand. He says, I want to know what's going on with Colin, because this is the first time he hasn't talked in like years. So we said, what is going on with you? And he said it so beautifully. He said, I feel like my whole life up to this point, I've been living in this amazing closet of books. And there's all this stuff to do and things to look at and read, and it was very interesting in this closet of mine. He said, but it's like I just found the door and I opened it, and it turns out I actually live in a mansion. He says, so I'm just exploring the mansion. That's the difference between the personal intellect and the impersonal intelligence behind life.